Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have a special guest, Denise Winkel. She is an enthusiast of people's diversity and individuality of food, music, nature's beauty, and learning. She's a licensed professional counselor with a private practice in Nampa, Idaho. And she got into counseling because she felt like God gave her more than a gentle nudge to work with her Christian peers on sexuality, shame, perfectionism, faith development, trauma, and conflict. She's been trained in emotionally focused therapy, EMDR, and brain spotting, and is currently in her second year of training with the Couples Institute. So thank you so much for coming on the show again with us, Denise.
Yes, so happy to be here.
I'm so glad you think it's fun because I think it's fun to have you, and you're just a delight and a wealth of information, always have been. So I'm excited to talk to you today a little bit about differentiation. First of all, why do you like this topic so much?
Oh man, I love this topic because it's personally affected my life. I learned about differentiation probably 12, 14 years ago, something like that, but from my husband. My husband was reading a book by David Schnarch, and he mentioned the term differentiation, and he told me what it was about, and all of a sudden I was completely offended. I was like, what? We want to think differently and have different opinions. What the heck are you talking about? So that's what started my journey with differentiation and learning about it and how to apply it in my life. And then with clients.
I have found myself drawn to this particular topic again and again. And for whatever reason, I don't even really know why. I think because people don't talk about it much. Despite how much I learn about it, I feel myself like forgetting parts of it. But then I rededicate myself to it. I'm like, oh, clients, you need to know all the things about it. And personally, I'm like, I need to apply all these things. But yeah, I think you can keep coming back to this topic and not go amiss.
Oh, absolutely. It's something, I feel like differentiation is something we learn throughout our lives. We learn how to be better differentiated with ourselves, right? First of all, and with others. We always have to look back at ourselves, and that's a maturity thing too. As we mature, we learn that we can have different opinions and ideas and allow other people to be themselves too. So it's a growth process.
Absolutely. I had a podcast guest on the other day that was talking about differentiation and individuation. And I was like, wait a second. Are those like very different or are they about the same thing? Do you actually know?
Yeah, so there are stages of development, right? And it's so interesting because we can talk about development from when children are born, right? And we start out in a symbiotic stage. Then we go on, and that's when we're confused, right? With our parent, our caregiver, and we think the same, right? We think we're also our mother. We differentiate between who is who, and then we have the same thoughts. And then we start to break apart from that and become in the differentiation stage, right? So we start to think a little differently. We start to push against mom a little bit. And that next stage after that is individuation. And that is where I start looking out for what do I want in the world. And I think differentiation you kind of have to get to and then move into individuation a little bit. So it is.
Thanks for clarifying that. But talk to me as if I know nothing about differentiation. I know a lot of the listeners out there, like, I think I might know what that is, but how does this apply to me and why does it even matter?
Differentiation is not the teaching of differentiation in education. It's not a marketing strategy. It's not sound differentiation in music theory. It's not hydrothermal differentiation, and it's not from quantum field theory, right? When it comes to psychological theories, Murray Bowen, he's the father of family systems theory. I love him. He's the one that kind of came up with the theory of differentiation, and it's being able to resist the contagiousness of another person's anxiety or their strong feelings. Kind of like germs. So I love imagining it as germs that we can quickly pick up or catch. We can catch the emotions of other people close to us. And we do whatever we can to get away from it, to fix it, to argue about it, to push away from those feelings. So differentiation is our ability to hang on to ourself and stay centered when someone else has strong feelings. And we don't have to get infected by negative emotions in the room, which is amazing. We do this in families. Like you can see how the tension builds, anxiety builds, and we all start having feelings about it and people start reacting, right? So I like to say it's being close to someone without getting reactive. And it's the sweet spot between autonomy and it's being more of myself and being closer to others all at the same time.
You gave us like so many good nuggets that I can't write down fast enough, and I love them. Like so many good one-liners. I should have them all embroidered on pillows all around.
Ah,
Really
oh,
lovely.
yeah, I'd want to see them in like in your office on your
Yeah,
couch. Like,
I
that
will
would be
definitely
great.
do that for you next time. I can do that. So let's see if I can say these back and tell me if I'm right
Mm,
here.
yes.
And then hanging on to yourself. So maybe like staying more grounded, close without being reactive, the autonomy versus the
Attachment.
okay.
Autonomy versus attachment, right? That sweet spot right in the middle of that. Attachment is important, right? That's part of being a human and feeling healthy, right? We need that, but we also need our autonomy and we're pushing for that freedom a lot. So it's that sweet spot in the middle there.
I love that
Yeah.
healthy, balanced middle space. That's a really great way to put it. So let's apply this to listeners. They may be parents. What are ways that you see this maybe with clients, because you're also a therapist, that
Yeah.
come up where you see a lot of like they're not quite there, that space where they can be differentiated? What do you see?
It's interesting to parse out differentiation a little bit to help listeners, I think, because there's differentiation of self and then there's differentiation from other. And so if we can have differentiation of self, that's really knowing what we think, what we feel, what we believe, what our values are, and we know how to express them. And I'd add one more part of that. It's like knowing our triggers. I think sometimes we use triggers as a way to shove off responsibility a little bit, but it's my responsibility to figure out what my triggers are, what makes me upset that really don't warrant that big of a reaction, right? The circumstances really don't cause me to feel that big or they should not. So it's up to me to recognize, identify them, own them, and work on them, right? So that's differentiation of self. And then differentiation from other. I take this from Ellen Bader. Man, I love her. She's the Couples Institute co-founder, and she's a co-founder of the developmental model. So good. She says differentiation is the ability to be curious about what your partner, or let's say your kids, right? Curious about what your partner or your kids, what they say, while managing our own emotional reactions. Especially with children, this is helpful. So that way I don't get swept up in the emotional storm. I'm able to inoculate myself from the contagion, right? So emotions are contagious and not get infected, which is really cool. So let's take that with parenting, for instance. And let's say I'm a mom of a 14-year-old boy, which I am. And yeah. And boy, those hormones, like the amazing growth they're going through, the social vulnerability that they're feeling. Okay, let's take an instance for me. Just this last weekend, I cut my son's hair. Now he's got curly hair and he wants it to be long and curly. And it was really high. I said, we need to cut this finally, sweetheart. And he's like, okay, let's do it. He always hates it when I cut his hair and he's worried about what he looks like, right? So I pulled up his hair and it was a good 6 inches from the top of his head. And so I cut about half of it and I cut the sides. It's hard when we get haircuts or we get a change. It's kind of scary when we look in the mirror and we say, whoa, that is way different. He was like, Mom, how could you cut my hair this short? I can't believe how long have you been cutting hair? Shouldn't you know how to cut it better than this? Right? Like he's like throwing out all these things and it's because he feels so self-conscious about it. And so I could get pulled into that emotional storm, right? He was feeling super anxious about it and angry. So I was able to take a step back and able to look at him and say, man, yeah, that would be hard, right? It would be hard to feel that way, buddy. And I kind of asked him some questions and I wasn't pulled into it. So if I can manage myself, I really had to watch myself though. I did have some feelings about it. I did think, how rude. I just spent time cutting his hair. And I did say, hey, we can always go to a barber next time if you'd like. So I started giving him other suggestions, but being able to keep myself calm. I was breathing. I was thinking some supportive things about myself. I did the best that I could and thinking things that are positive about him too, right? This really was hard for him to have an alteration in the way he looks at that age. So that's kind of differentiation, right? I was trying to know and think of what I was feeling and hold on to my own values. I didn't want to get mad at him. And I wanted to be able to hold on to myself. That's a value and a belief of mine. And then with him, being able to be differentiated and not be pulled into all of his emotions and stand back. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's such a good. And I love the examples to help us visualize it. I swear almost all of my podcast episodes go back to this, but it's that staying grounded or attempting to staying curious. And it's also not going into that space of justifying or defending, getting swept up in that argument or defensiveness of any sort. But yeah, just empathizing, holding on to those values. It really does feel like a superpower when you talk about it. But we all know that our parents, especially, really any situation, where it's so easy to get swept up, like how you talked about it as being contagious. And those emotions, that storm. I like, especially when you said in the beginning, you were almost offended when your husband talked about this.
Yes.
I felt the same way. It's, wait a second. This is your stuff. This is not my fault that I'm reacting. This is your problem. It's like, that's not true.
So with my son, I had to take responsibility for myself and not get reactive. And I really feel like being curious and having mantras that we say to ourselves to hold on and breathing, that can help us because it is my responsibility how I react to him, even though he's being a poop.
That's
gratitude.
The official term that you use in counseling.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so helpful. So knowing your triggers and then staying curious while managing your own reactions. Do you mind maybe giving us another example of that, what that could look like maybe in marriage? I feel like this comes up with me sometimes even more in marriage.
Oh, that is definitely, yeah. In my marriage, that doesn't happen. Oh, okay, it does. And even with myself, like I notice my husband and I have really worked hard at trying to listen to each other and to not get reactive. We're still working on this. We had a discussion, gosh, that was probably a month ago, where I was frustrated by his lack of understanding how much I have on my plate. And so I talked to him and said, hey, this is really hard for me. And I listed things that he would do or how he would kind of dismiss. And he was actually able to sit with me in it. And he rephrased what I was saying. And he said, okay, I understand what you're saying. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he's like, what can I do about it? And I said, maybe this would be helpful. We worked on some things that we could do differently. And at the end of the conversation, I looked at him and I said, sweet, after 30 years of marriage, we like high five. Oh my gosh. But I do feel reactive sometimes when he brings up something new. If my mind isn't in that space or I haven't been given time to think about it, I will go. And I notice it in myself. You can feel it internally, right? When there's some sort of reaction. So I always take a step back, right? Like I have to say, wait a second, I'm not an animal. This is one of my favorite things to say because animals are reactive, right? We are different than animals because we can think about our thoughts. And I love that because we have this another superpower, right? Where something's happened that triggers us and we react to it. We don't have to do that. We're humans that have this ability to think about our thoughts. And so we can notice the feelings that are coming up, be curious, ask questions. So definitely in marriage, this comes up all the time. Can I allow my spouse to have a different opinion? Can I allow him to have different thoughts? Can I allow him to have different beliefs? Right. And can I honor those and just be curious and know that it's nothing about myself, that it's about him. And I don't have to take it personally. But sometimes it's hard, right? When we're enmeshed, it's difficult to pull away. But I'm telling you, it is such a healthier way to have a relationship if you can honor that person and what they're thinking and not think this has anything to do with me.
Yeah. Beautifully said. And I love, again, that ownership piece. I go back to that a lot. Sometimes it's easier to see yourself if you talk about the opposite side too. What is the opposite of differentiation? And what does that look like for parents or spouses or even individuals, whatever you want to go with?
Okay. So I follow Kathleen Smith. I love Bowen Family Systems Theory. And she has some really good books. So maybe I'll mention those at the end. But ways to identify if I'm not differentiated. There are 4 losing strategies that Kathleen Smith talks about. The first one is I create distance between whatever feels anxious to me. So if my husband is talking about something I don't like, I'm going to walk out of the room, right? If my parents drive me nuts, I'm going to move across the country. These are ways that we deal with anxiety, or I avoid a person that I'm afraid to talk to. I feel some anxiety over that. That's not differentiated because I'm not going towards it. I'm holding myself back. I'm pulling myself away, not able to own, right, who I am in the face of the emotional storm, right? So that's a number one way to know I'm distancing myself. Another way is if I fight, right? If I automatically go into reactivity and I fight and I don't listen, if I like to start up contention, right, then I know I'm not super differentiated, because if I were, I would be able to listen, ask questions, calm myself down, but I like to fight it out. Okay. And another way is overfunctioning. If I overfunction for people, and I don't know if your listeners know what that means, but where I'm doing way too much than I really should, I'm enabling someone else to have less responsibility. And we do that a lot for our children, right? We tend to do things for them that they could probably do themselves. And it would teach them a lot to allow them to do it. But if I'm over functioning, I am feeling the anxiety and wanting to make up for it. I'll do that in my house with the kitchen counters. Somebody else is responsible for it. And sometimes I'll just start wiping it up, right? Because I don't like the way that it feels. I want it done, but I know that someone else has a responsibility. So how do I hold on to myself in that? I say, okay, you know what? They're going to do it later. And I'm going to take a step and allow them to have that responsibility. That's okay. It's not the end of the world if my counters are a disaster. That's totally okay. So that's another way to show I'm not being super differentiated in the moment. If I'm under functioning, that's the opposite. If I'm not owning up to my tasks, to my responsibilities, if I'm feeling it's hard for me to meet those, then that's another way that I'm not being differentiated. So my favorite is triangulation. So triangulation is when you pull a third party into the relationship so that you feel better. So an example of this would be if my husband ticks me off and he does something, I call my friend and I complain about my husband to my friend, right? I'm feeling anxious about that conversation and I am unloading that weight of that anxiety onto my friend. Now, can she do anything about it? She can't. And I'm poisoning the well there. If I'm differentiated, I am able to go towards my spouse and talk to the person. So I say, go to the person, go to the source of where the friction is, where I'm feeling weird, go towards it. And sometimes it's okay to triangulate. Let's just be real. It's nice to talk to friends, nice to talk to your sister, but the rule should be I talk to the person I'm having a hard time with. Because if I'm not, right, I'm not holding on to myself, I'm going to someone else to soothe me.
I haven't actually heard of all of these together. So who was the person that talked about it?
Colleen Smith. Yeah.
Okay. So if I stand those right, then there's that distance where there's not a lot of ownership, or you leave something, there's an avoidance, or otherwise there's fighting, reactivity, not listening. Then there's over functioning or under functioning, which just can be enabling. You can feel anxious, right? And then the last one is triangulation, where you're pulling in that third party. And I see that a lot with a lot of clients, like this need to justify their behaviors and get like a cheerleader behind them. And I notice it with family relationships where they don't even necessarily notice what they're doing, but they're like, okay, my husband and I are fighting, so I'm going to bond more with my son and act like I don't care. But it's really unhealthy, obviously.
That brings a child up and puts him in an awkward spot where he has to choose between mom or dad. Unhealthy triangulation for sure.
Absolutely. So why does all of this matter, Denise? Yes, it sounds beautiful, but it's so hard to stay differentiated. And can you even stay differentiated for an extended period of time?
Yeah, it's a lifelong practice and always checking ourselves of, am I being differentiated? Do I know my own thoughts? Do I know my own feelings? Am I able to allow someone else to be themselves? Am I able to be myself in the face of other people? But it's helpful for me because it helps me to know who I am. If I know my thoughts and feelings, beliefs, that really does help me. It builds my confidence in myself. And it allows me to be closer to others because
Mhm.
I don't have to hide parts of myself. If I'm differentiated, I own it. That's who I am. It's okay. I don't have to walk on eggshells around other people. How fabulous would that be?
Yeah.
I can learn how to regulate my own emotions and my inner world. I can function using my own thinking, right? That it's okay if I think differently. I can make decisions based on my beliefs and my values. And I'm able to identify and set boundaries a lot easier.
I feel like there's so many layers that I'm still discovering of not being pulled into that storm, taking more ownership, letting go, having more curiosity, remembering that you can give yourself time, you can do what you need to do, and then come back and respond in that more grounded way, that differentiated way. Yeah, I think it's still hard for me to show up, but I can get there if I give myself some grace and some space, honestly.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Part of differentiation is giving yourself grace because you know yourself. You're trying to work on this. You give yourself kudos when you do well, and you look at when you don't do well and say, oh, that was not as differentiated as I was hoping. How could I do it differently next time?
Yeah. What would you say are just a couple tips to start for someone that feels like, okay, I'm in the not differentiated category? A couple things they could do to
Yeah.
start.
Okay. So I follow David Schnarch as well. He does crucible therapy. He's off of Bowen Family Systems Theory, and he has 4 points of balance, if that's okay. So there's 4 of them that I tend to look at for myself and with clients. So the first part is to work on having a solid, flexible sense of self. So that is owning my own warts, right? Or owning my warts and everything. And to realize we are changing human beings. We're constantly in a state of growth. So what I believe or know right now might change in the future, and it will change a little bit. And so being flexible with that, but knowing myself and owning the parts that, we don't love and the parts that we do love. So that's number one, just really looking at that. Number two is to have grounded responding. So it's holding on to myself. It's letting things land from other people. I always think of an airplane, right? I'm going to let it land on me. I'm just going to let it go because I want it to be safe. And I'm going to just breathe through that and try not to get triggered that it's okay. This is their airplane landing. I'm just the landing strip. I'm just going to let it land and I don't have to do anything about it. Okay. The third thing is having a quiet mind, calm heart. And that's like the part where we can do self-talk. And I love calling it supportive self-talk, right? Because we're all in a state of change and growing. And so how can I support myself in that? Can I say, oh, you did so good, or you've got this, or you know what, just hang on, this kid is being a pain. I can do this. Just calm self-talk, okay? Self-soothing techniques, right? Whether that's breathing, or grounding exercises that you've learned, mantras that you can say, and really learning how to regulate yourself. And this takes practice, right? It takes grace, it takes practice. And the last thing is called meaningful endurance. And I really like this one because it's just basically knowing that all of this is worthwhile, this effort and kind of the pain sometimes that we go through, right? This is tough stuff to be able to be differentiated, but that effort will pay off slowly but surely. So being able to recognize what am I doing that well and be excited about that, be our own cheerleaders and knowing it will pay off eventually.
Ooh, that is well said. And again, I haven't heard of this one. You're so good with all these nuggets of wisdom. I just want you to keep coming back and give us like a synopsis of everything in those little nuggets. That'd be really helpful. Be in mind.
Every week.
So if I got that, it's owning my warts, that grounded response or responding, quiet mind, calm heart, and then meaningful endurance.
Yes. Yep. Good job.
Wonderful. I feel like that's a good way to break it down on, okay, where can I start? And letting go of, uh, you realize you're not as differentiated as you had hoped, and recognizing there is small things that you can do to get there, whether that's with your child, whether that's with your husband. It's really anybody. Like when it comes to not getting swept up in somebody's emotions, I think of maybe that or somebody in
Yeah.
the store. It can be practiced in many areas.
Yes, in all the areas of your life. And it really does help you personally if you can take a step back and be okay with others doing their thing, being reactive, right? Then I can hold on to myself. And it feels pretty good to be able to do that. And it does build your confidence, right? So using that grace that you talked about being gentle with yourself when it's slow going, that's okay.
So then my last question is tied to that. How have you, Denise, created more fulfillment in your life and maybe even tied to differentiation, perhaps?
Tied to differentiation. I think I have learned to be more of a self, and that means I'm knowing what I like more. I would say when I had young kids that I didn't differentiate, right? I was very tied into how my children were doing, their accomplishments, their homework, right? And feeling good about their things that they're doing and making that a part of who I was. And which is okay. But when your children start making different choices or when they do things that you're like, oh, then we really take it upon ourselves. We're enmeshed. And so I think I've done a better job of being able to say, this is what I want to do. This is who I am. And this is who they are. It's okay if they think differently than me. We'll have discussions at the dinner table where we ask them like political questions. We ask them questions about sexuality. We ask them questions about their friends or their beliefs. And we try and keep it as open-ended as possible. And that has been great to be able to not be upset or angry that they have a different idea than I do. And I think, what the heck? What do you, but I don't say that, right? Like I just ask questions. How do you feel about that? Where have you seen that? So I ask a bunch of questions. So I feel like that has helped me in pursuing my occupation. It's helped me with friends. It's helped me with family, right? There's almost always some sort of family drama or things that are hard in a family. And it really has helped me that way. So for me, that's very fulfilling to see the way that it has impacted myself and the rest of my family members and friends and people I work with.
It is so nice when you can get to this space more and more. I remember looking at my husband early on in our marriage and just being so impressed that he could stay calm. This person was just screaming at him. You would think that he was talking to a best friend, just smiling and like calm. And I was like, wow, how does he do that? Just this superpower to not get swept up in that storm. And over
Yes.
time, I'm slowly realizing it. But then every once in a while, like another example, my sweet son is 9 years old, and he came home and I had accidentally blonde hair and bangs that I wasn't intending on exactly. But he said, "I don't like your hair. It doesn't do much for you. You shouldn't have done that." And like a few other things. And I was like, that kind of hurt. But not just allowing him to have his opinion, maybe having a conversation about softer approaches, but also just letting go of other people's response and just regulating myself and maybe conversations, like I said. But so many good
Yes.
tips and different things that you taught us today to be able to have that differentiation that can bring more peace and more fulfillment in our lives. And it sounds like it only takes about 30 years in marriage. Is that what you said, Denise?
Yes, it doesn't have to take that long, but I even would say it still is a process, right? I don't feel like we're completely there. So it's going to be a lifelong process, and that's great.
Yeah. And just letting go, knowing you're leaning in and you're doing your best.
That's right. Do your best, forget the rest.
Thank you again for coming on the show. And Denise, where can we find you?
You can find me on Psychology Today. You can look up Denise Winkel. We do have a website we're redeveloping, so I can't give that out. So that's probably good. And I'm sure Kendra has information in the show notes if anybody wants to get a hold of me.
Yes, absolutely. We do. I appreciate you teaching us today, and I'll have you back on for the next topic in the future. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you. No matter what your house or your hair looks like, I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.